Alright guys, we're back. She just likes to let me know she's home and she's fine. She's just being sweet, but I hate getting interrupted. So let me try to pick up where I left off. I think I was talking about how, the soft line will rot and the problems it'll cause. So that's just something to keep in mind. When you first get a truck and, not a lot's been done to it, first thing you do is change the fuel filters, take this assembly up out of the tank, and put a new piece of soft line on it. It's 1/2-inch fuel hose. It's best if you can find immersion rated or submersion rated fuel hose, but that is actually pretty hard to find. I use generally the blue Parker Weatherhead fuel hose, or just some regular good quality fuel hose, and keep in mind, if it's not immersion rated, you're going to have to change it out every few years because it's going to get brittle and eat the outer casing off of it. And like if you're changing your fuel filters and you start noticing there's black specks of stuff in them, that's pieces of your fuel line that's coming apart. This assembly, if your fuel pump isn't working and you don't know why, the first thing you want to check is under this cover, 3 7/16 nuts. You pull that up and there's a fuse in there. It's a glass tube type fuse, supposed to be a 2-amp slow blow. You can go ahead and put like a 5-amp regular fuse in it, or 10-amp. If it's going to blow, it's going to blow. You're not going to cause a fire putting a little bit bigger fuse in it. Hell, a lot of people just put a piece of metal in there, and I mean, I'm not saying that's what you should do. It's definitely not what you should do. You should go to the hardware store and get a 2-amp slow blow, but I know a lot of people have done it, and I haven't heard of anybody having an in-tank fire because of it. So, yeah. Anyway, so this connector, one of the main reasons that these actual motors fail is because if you look at the top here, okay, your connector, and this is kind of what you have to do when you can't get them to come off. This connector is sealed onto here by I think that's a Viton O-ring, and it's also soldered on. So, when they soldered that on at the factory, that Viton got pretty hot. Now, obviously it's sealed for however many years, but usually what happens is that seal will fail, either this one or the seal in the bottom, and you'll get fuel inside the motor. You'll get fuel intrusion inside the case. This is a sealed case. Shouldn't have any fuel inside here, and that just burns them up. So the other way these fail, and by the way, this is the first time that this has happened to me. I've pulled on these fuckers as hard as you can, enough to where I thought I was going to tear the metal casing around the wire off. I've never had one of these come off. It's never happened to me. So this is, that's a first. Anyway. The other thing that happens to these quite often is, if you look here, the foot of the pump assembly, the actual pumping element, you have motor here and then pump here. These rivets will either rust out and the whole bottom will fall off, or sometimes the things will, and you see, actually, if you listen, don't know if you can hear that, these rivets get loose, which these are, and through use and vibration of the truck running down the road, eventually the rivets will wear through and fall off, and then the whole bottom of the pump will fall off, and you'll have the impeller and the guts down and just rolling around at the bottom of the tank. So you might hear the motor running, but you're not pumping any fuel. So you know what, I want to see if I can open this motor up. I've never actually. First I'm going to see if I can cut the rivets off the bottom of this with a cold chisel. Show you what the insides of the foot pumping assembly looks like. Here's one. 4, yay. Okay, punch. Now we gotta knock the rivets back in just so they'll clear the upper case. All right. Well, what are you hanging up on now, you shit ass? There we go. Okay. See at the bottom of the motor, you've got this, I don't even know what I would call that. It's like a wear pad in the center. And you can see it was, if you look careful, camera, you see it was spot welded in. And I have a suspicion, I've never verified it, but I have a suspicion that sometimes those spot welds get a little too hot and they leave a hole in the case, or even some of these spot welds around here. And you know, just a tiny pinhole, and over years and years of this sitting under fuel, fuel seeps in there, but not fast because it's sitting this way. So you have an air bubble up here. So of course fuel isn't going to go in there overnight or even a few days or even a few weeks. It's going to take years for it to intrude that way. Now that's just a theory. I've never verified that, but I do know fuel gets in these and it's most likely always through here. But that's a theory. So you might think, well, okay, this is the motor. There's nothing down here that spins, right? How does that work? It's a magnetic drive. And that's why you have this little tiny ball bearing and this other little wear washer right here. It goes in that little cavity in there. And let's see if we can get this to come apart. Oh, there's another one. Two, I don't know, I guess you'd call these thrust washers. One sits down in there, ball bearing sits on it, and the other one sits on top of it. And that sits against that, I think that's the order it sits in. Anyway. Shit. Yeah, so these usually fall apart inside the tank. So of course now that I'm trying to show you this stuff, it won't come apart. But I guess that's because it's not doing it naturally. See if we can knock these little rivets out. Yeah, it'll come out once I get these knocked out. So if you take your pump out and it actually has screws here instead of rivets, there's a good chance that it's been repaired before from this exact failure I'm describing. The bottom falling off. Oh, you. Okay. So we're still not wanting to come apart. Hang on. This one ain't no good either. I got all of this and no Phillips screwdriver. I wonder if this will fit. And that's exactly what I was just telling you. This one has been repaired before. Because these are, I think these are both, where's the label of this? I don't see a label. They should have the brand printed on it. Sometimes they just wear off, but I think these are, yeah. This is, okay, this is a Torkheim. I've seen Johnson controls as well. You'll see the old brand labeling right there. Come on, you turd. Focus for the people. Anyway. So maybe some of them were made with screws, but I know for a fact some of them have been repaired by inserting screws where rivets have failed. And I have pulled them apart and had them fall apart when they're coming out of the tank because the rivets were worn through. And I want to say that the bottom, this bottom plate falls off on some of them and the guts fall out the bottom instead of the whole foot falling off. But it's been a long time since I messed with one of these because I actually upgraded to the Parker style pump, and you don't have any of those problems with them. You know, those are an awesome pump. Way better than these ever dreamed of being. Look at all that corrosion coming out of there. Yeah. Damn. I may not be able to get one of these apart for y'all today. Come on, you shithead. You know what? These are junk anyway. I'm just going to start tearing it apart because there's no reason to keep it together. It's not even good for parts, really, so. Especially not with that much corrosion in it. Yay. Destructive exploration. Feel like a kid again. Break my toys, see what's inside. Mom, can I have another one? No, you little shit. No, I don't know about you guys, but I learned real quick when I was a kid. If you take your toys apart and you can't put them back together, you're not getting another one. That's the kind of kid I was. I wanted to see how things worked. And I'm still like that. They fall apart in the tank, but if you want to take them apart, they will not come apart. That's the way things go. All right. Yeah. Let's see. I don't think this is going to work, but we're going to try it. It is working. I need a little bit bigger punch, though, to do this safely. Okay. So there's the magnet drive. And all it's got the same kind of thing with the opposite poles inside this case here. And since it's stainless, being non-magnetic, actually that is slightly magnetic. I don't know what grade stainless that is, but it's not a highly magnetic grade. It doesn't interfere with the magnetic field. So you get a good magnetic drive because this is an electromagnet, I think. So I was hoping it would knock the bottom plate off. And I can show you the impeller, which is still in there. We're going to see if we can do that, but it may not work. This is so stupid. Well, it's going through the bottom plate. It's not knocking it off, though. Coming off now. This does kind of suck having to do this, but I really want to show you guys this and only have to show you once, you know. I don't want to have to do this anymore. Okay. So, oh wow, I moved the camera quite a bit doing that, didn't it? You see the rivets holding the bottom plate on. One is broken through and the other is just barely hanging on. That's what happens in the tank. Because they are aluminum, this whole base plate is aluminum, they just corrode away. They're not even rivets, they're just like, well, they might be rivets. But anyway, they suck. So this bottom plate falls off, and then your impeller, well, the impeller usually falls off the end of the shaft, but since I was beating it down with a hammer through the bottom plate, it actually pushed it up onto the shaft and wedged it. In fact, I don't know if you can see that, if you look at it just right, you can see a bow in it. But yeah, this falls off and rolls around the tank, and then you don't get nothing. You might even get this shaft spinning, but since there's no impeller in there, you get nothing. And then you see the way it works, just like a centrifugal pump. The impeller spins and it pushes fuel into here and up through your line, into your fuel line, to your filters, and to your motor. Now this whole pump, even if you get the replacement Parker style pump, it's not a high pressure pump. It's a high volume, low pressure. It's rated for like 4 to 7 psi. I can't recall right off the top of my head how many gallons per hour. The Parker pumps are rated in pounds per hour because they're also used on aircraft, and I think that was the original intended purpose, but they're also used in armored vehicles like the Bradley and stuff. They just happen to fit just about everything. So, another big light bushing there. Anyway, I want to say it's like, I don't know. I don't want to say something that sounds stupid. I want to say it's like 60 gallons per hour, but that's not even enough for a 12 valve at stock. So it's got to be way more than that. I need to look it up again, but here's the deal with that, with the rating, the flow rating. Okay, on the multi-fuel engine specifically, you don't want to exceed the input pressure from the lift pump by a lot. Okay, you can go a little over. You can maybe be comfortable with 15 pounds of input pressure, but keep in mind that you have only so much that your return lines can only accommodate so much flow. When you increase pressure, you also increase flow. It's how hydraulics work. Okay, it's like hydraulics 101. So if you overpressure it, you end up opening up bypass valves before they should be open, and you can actually end up putting less fuel to the pump, to the injector pump, resulting in a loss of power. Or if those valves don't open when they should, if they're old and corroded, or the spring is too stiff or whatever, if you've shimmed them or somebody else has shimmed them, then you may end up putting too much pressure into the pump, and then it doesn't want to run right because it can't figure out, the pump can't figure out what it needs to do because it's being fed too much. So generally that is controlled in the boost pump. There's a good check valve, recirc valve in there. I know you can up the fuel pressure past the boost pump, and it helps you to an extent. Once it gets too much, though, it messes stuff up. So I can't stress this enough, because I've had this conversation with people so many times, and it's always an argument because people don't understand hydraulics and fluid dynamics. If you try to replace one of these pumps in your tank with, let me show you right here. You try to replace one of those pumps with one of these little pumps, one of the inline 24-volt clicker pumps, you're an idiot. I'm not even going to have that conversation with you, because look, those pumps have 1/4 inch inlet and outlet, and they're a clicker pump. Click, 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 click. They're low volume, low pressure. Okay? If you try to put that in a system that is a 1/2 inch high volume, low pressure supply system, you're shooting yourself in the foot. That pump, those little pumps, end up being more of a restriction in the fuel system because they can't flow enough through them. They run the same pressure as these do, okay? You cannot flow as much fuel at 4 psi to 7 psi through a 1/4 inch pump as you can at 4 to 7 psi through a 1/2 inch pump with a centrifugal pump on it. It's ridiculous to even think that you could. Now, will that pump prime your system? Will it fill up your fuel filters and let you get positive pressure out of the bleeder on the motor? Yes, it will. But it will not supply the proper amount of fuel to run that truck down the road at the power that it needs. And it will not supply enough fuel to run, especially at full load, enough fuel through the system to keep the hydraulic head on the pump cool and keep it from wearing out. Now, I don't want to hear that you've had one of those pumps on your truck for years and it runs just fine, because your truck runs like a dog and you just don't know it, because everybody says, oh, Deuces are underpowered and they run like turds. And well, yes they are, but not that bad, okay? I've pulled more of those pumps off people's trucks than I can even remember, and it's a whole new truck when you actually put the right pump in them. So I'm just putting that out there. I'm not going to have that conversation with you. It's not worth having. Do with it what you will. If you don't believe me, if you want to run that pump on your truck, fine. But I don't want to hear that it's low on power, and I don't want to hear that you need an injector pump. I don't want to hear that you need to find out where you can buy a hydraulic head these days, and how it sucks that they're only made in China, and this, that, and the other, because you didn't listen. So do yourself a favor and find the right pump. Either find an old Torkheim or one of the replacement Parkers. They're getting harder to find now, especially the Parkers, and they're going up in price. They used to be like $75 on eBay. Now they're 100, 150, even up to $400. But they're rebuildable. So that pump, it's no problem to get the rebuild kits. That pump will last you the rest of the time you own the truck. These pumps, once they go out, they're garbage. So I wouldn't suggest buying one of these. I'd suggest buying a Parker if you're going to do it at all. Now you can put an aftermarket lift pump on it, like one of the one of the fast fuel systems, if you can regulate the pressure down enough and keep the flow. And what you'll have to do is use an aftermarket supply pressure regulator. But if you want to get into all that, we can talk about that another time, or you can call up one of the diesel supply places and tell them what you need. I need a fast fuel system, but I only need 10 psi or 15 psi at the max end. And that's probably going to be something like a fast titanium for a 12-valve Cummins, a Dodge. That would probably be suitable. Anyway, I've rambled on enough about this. I think I really want to say that is all I can tell you today about. Now it's raining. Okay, fine. At least this wasn't in the middle of my video. So, look, check out our sponsor, Big Mike's Motor Pool. His contact information is down in the description. I don't know if he's got Parker pumps right now, but if you need one, he can get you one, I promise you. Anything else you need, you can get it. Like and subscribe. Hope you learned something. Catch you later. It doesn't want to stop. This camera never wants to stop.